Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to Africa Today. In today's edition, we'll be tackling the Egyptian-African relations, and we'll be joined by Ambassador Ahmed Hagag, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister and the Secretary General of the African Society in Cairo, to shed light on this issue. But first, we'll start with this report. The EU hosted a milestone international conference on Somalia aimed at underpinning the economic and political recovery after 2 decades of the bloody civil war. Shireen Adil has more details.
The delegation, led by former Malian President Alpha Omar Konari, briefed the Council in its 395th meeting held on Friday in Addis Ababa on the outcomes of its second visit to Egypt. The Council now is awaiting the panel's official report of its findings. The Council encouraged the panel to pursue its efforts and interactions with Egyptian stakeholders and other consultants. According to a press statement published following Friday's meeting, the Council is expecting a report from the delegation regarding the situation in Egypt as well as on the way forward. The delegation returned to Cairo at the end of August to hold further meetings with Egyptian officials and other political actors in Egypt. Their second meeting came almost a month after the first visit, during which the delegation met with former President Mohamed Morsi as well as interim government officials, including interim President Adli Mansour, Minister of Defense Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and Minister of Foreign Affairs Nabil Fahmy. Egypt's membership in the Peace and Security Council was suspended following Morsi's ouster on the 3rd of July, a decision that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has disagreed with and hopes that the Council will reconsider. In Friday's meeting, the Council expressed its appreciation to the Egyptian authorities for facilitating the panel's visit and its consultations with various Egyptian stakeholders. The Council also reiterated its previous statements regarding the situation in Egypt, stressing the need of all parties to uphold the spirit of dialogue, inclusivity, and national reconciliation.
We now go to this report about the situation in Somalia, and the former report was about the AU delegation's visit to Egypt, which was headed by Alpha Omar Konari, the former Malian president, and his accompanying delegation. Now with this report about Somalia.
Some 50 high-level delegations from Africa, Europe, the Gulf attended the New Deal in Somalia event in Brussels, gathering President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, other Somali leaders, world aid groups, and global finance institutions. Britain's ambassador to Somalia, Neil Wigan, said the conference was a major milestone after the country's remarkable progress over the last year. With diplomats hoping to see more than €1 billion in pledges, Wigan said the combined efforts will maintain momentum and deliver the change that the people of Somalia desperately need of. In January, Mahmoud won formal U.S. recognition of his government for the first time since the 1991 overthrow of Mohammed Sayed Barre that plunged the country into civil war. For the past year, it has seen a president, government, and parliament function without interruption. But the fragility of its institutions means it cannot yet be given loans and will have to accept grants. High on the current agenda was a Somali campaign to get 1 million children into school in a country that has one of the world's lowest enrollment rates, with only 4 of every 10 children in class. In the 2008-2013 period, the European Union provided €1.2 billion in aid to the country, €521 million in development cooperation, and €697 million in the field of security. The largest slice of that is funding for the African Union mission in Somalia, comprising some 17,000 troops and launched in 2007 with UN Security Council approval. It props up the weak central government in Mogadishu and fights alongside its army, seizing a string of towns from the Shabab militants. but the authorities have been dealt a number of setbacks in recent months, including several deadly Shabab attacks. Their most brazen recent attack was a suicide commando assault on a fortified UN compound in the center of Mogadishu in June that killed 11. And at least 18 people were killed in Mogadishu on the 7th of September when two blasts rocked a popular restaurant in attacks quickly claimed by Shabab militants. As well as a military training mission in Somalia, the EU runs an anti-piracy operation off the Somali coast, where attacks on shipping have fallen steadily in the past year. Mahmoud's government came to power last September after more than a decade of transitional rule.
Welcome back. To shed light on the Egyptian-African relations, we have with us in the studio Ambassador Ahmed Hagag, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister and the Secretary General of the African Society in Cairo. Hello, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Sir, how do you evaluate the Egyptian-African relations after the June 30th revolution, taking into consideration that the African Union did freeze the Egyptian membership in the organization for a while now?
Relation between Egypt and the rest of African countries are very old and very solid. And I don't want to go to the past and say how much Egypt assisted liberation movements in Africa. We have 15,000 African students in Egypt. Egypt sending a lot of its experts to different African countries, doctors, engineers. But in this year, we have been surprised by the hasty decision of the African Union to suspend Egyptian activities inside the African Union. This was done in haste. They have not waited till they respond to Egypt's invitation.
It was so quick.
So
we
quick.
We did not see a similar reaction after the January 25th revolution.
Exactly.
Why, sir, did we see this difference in reaction after the June 30th revolution from the African Union?
There are certain selfish interests of certain few African countries, not the majority, which they want to pursue their narrow ambitions. They're thinking when they suspend the Egypt activities, they will have a better position in Africa. We are accustomed to this, and we don't give it too much importance. But they pushed the Peace and Security Council in order to take a decision before they respond, as I mentioned before, to Egypt's invitation to send. While, as you mentioned, after the January 2011 revolution, there was a similar situation, and they have welcomed and they welcomed the Egyptian and the role of the military in this case. So it seems that this selfish and narrow ambition of certain African countries was behind this, beside also some people in the leadership of the African Union who pushed for this decision. But we have received here in Cairo twice the delegation of the African Union with the participation of 3 former heads of states.
And headed by
Mr. Connery, former president. And they met everybody, Egyptian government, and even Muslim Brotherhood. And they were granted the opportunity to meet former President Morsi, which was given to the European Union delegation. And according to them, in our talks with them, they went out with positive
and it was mentioned in the press conference, but up to this moment, sir, we did not see any official reaction from the African Union about the situation in Egypt and about the condition of the Egyptian membership in the African Union.
They were supposed to present their report.
Why this delay?
But there are zigzagging. We don't know who is behind the zigzagging attitude of the African Union. And we will come to the truth, and Egypt will will take the proper decision accordingly.
Sir, we have seen tours by many Egyptian diplomats in the African continent in order to make clear that what happened in Egypt was not a coup d'etat, it was a mass revolution. And of course, the military did support the people's will. How do you see the efforts exerted by the Egyptian diplomacy in order to give clear image of the situation in Egypt?
This decision by the African Union was not received positively in Africa. I received many messages from my friends in Africa and press articles which were criticizing the African Union about the haste of such a decision. Those Egyptian diplomats who went to African countries, most of the heads of state they met, they were surprised by the haste of the African Union and assured Egypt that they consider Egypt as a cornerstone of any work inside the African Union, and they expressed gratitude to Egypt's assistance to their government.